I overheard her tell her friend, "I'll dump him after the Europe trip he paid for." I canceled her ticket that night and went alone. She called screaming from the airport. I texted her a selfie from the Louvre. Thanks for the recommendations. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Thanks. The itinerary was perfect. Or at least, I thought so. 3 weeks, 4 countries, a spiral-bound booklet of reservations and confirmations on my desk that represented a year of saving and 6 months of meticulous planning. I was finalizing the dinner reservation for our last night in Paris, a tiny, romantic place she'd pinned on Pinterest months ago when her laughter bubbled in from the living room. I told her I was on a final pre-trip video call with my team, mic muted, a white lie to preserve the last few surprises. I clicked the mute button on my headset, but didn't say anything, just letting the dead air connect me to the room beyond my office door. Her voice was bright, conspiratorial. I know. 2 more weeks of pretending to be excited about museums and his boring, color-coded spreadsheet of a life. A cold trickle started at the base of my spine. I stared at the reservation screen, the blinking cursor. It's a 3-week, all-expenses-paid tour of Europe, Stacy, she continued, the smile audible in her voice. First-class hotels, flights, the works. I'm not an idiot. I've earned this. Earned this. The words hung in the air. I'd picked up extra freelance projects. I'd skipped a guy's trip to Vegas. I'd earned this for us. Stacy's muffled voice came through the phone speaker. I couldn't make out the words, just the questioning tone. The second we land back home, done, my girlfriend, Sarah, said, a note of finality there that I'd never heard directed at me. I've already got my stuff semi-packed at my mom's. He's so clueless, so desperate to make this perfect, he won't see it coming. It'll be clean. The cold trickle became a flood, freezing me in my chair. My hands, which had been flying over the keyboard, were now stone. The apartment, our apartment with the framed photos and the rug she'd picked out, seemed to tilt. Stacy said something else. God, no, Sarah scoffed, and the sound was a physical blow. Mark is nothing like him. Mark has actual ambition, a vibe. He doesn't plan spontaneity. Once I'm free and have those Instagram pics, Mark and I are going to Miami. That's a real vacation. Mark from her spin class. Mark with the podcast about cryptocurrency. Mark who'd borrowed $50 from me at a bar and never paid it back. I dismissed him as a harmless clown. A prop. A memory flash fired in the icy void of my mind. Last year, when she'd been crying over maxed-out credit cards from her shopping, the interest swallowing her whole. I'd taken on a brutal, 3-month website overhaul for a terrible client. The payoff cleared her debt. You saved me, she'd whispered, tears on my shirt. I'll never forget this. I'd felt like a knight, a provider. Now, the words replayed with a new, grotesque subtitle, Useful Idiot. The pain was a sharp, singular thing, a diamond-tipped drill to the center of my chest. But then, something extraordinary happened. As I sat there, listening to the woman I loved diagram my obsolescence, the pain didn't explode. It crystallized. It hardened into something clear, cold, and infinitely more useful, clarity. This wasn't a heartbreak. This was an intelligence report. She had presented her strategy, her timeline, and her exit plan. My role was to be the unwitting funder, the final chore in her project plan before moving on to the more exciting client, Mark. Anger tried to flare, a hot, red wave urging me to kick the door open, to scream, to demand. But it sputtered against the ice. Confrontation was what she expected from a clueless man. It would be messy, emotional, and ultimately a negotiation. It would give her power, a chance to spin, to lie, to play the victim. It would be part of her drama. I didn't want drama. I wanted justice. No, not even justice. I wanted a correction. An administrative correction to a monumental accounting error. Me. I took a breath that felt like the first one. My fingers, which had been locked, flexed. I looked at the reservation screen. I looked at the spiral-bound booklet. My work, my money, my dream trip. A new plan began to form. Not a plan of emotion, but of logistics. It was clean, precise, and utterly silent. I reached for the mouse. I unmuted my headset mic. Yeah, Mike, I think that's the last of it, I said, my voice remarkably steady, pitched to Carrie. Thanks for the late night. See you tomorrow. I heard a swift, rustling movement from the living room. The quick, guilty end of a phone call. Okay, bye, she chirped to Stacy. I stood up, my legs steady, and opened the office door. She was on the couch, phone face down, a magazine suddenly in her hands. She looked up, and her smile was a masterpiece of performative affection. It made me want to laugh. How had I never seen the seams? All done with work stuff, she asked, her voice sweet. All done, I said, walking over. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. Her body was tense for a half second before relaxing. Just finalizing the last few surprises for the trip. Her eyes lit up, and for a heartbreaking moment, it looked real. I can't wait. It's all I've been thinking about. I just bet it is, I thought. Mine too, I said, smiling back. It was a perfect mirror of her own expression. The smile of a man who had a wonderful, color-coded future ahead of him. The smile of a man who saw nothing at all. I'm going to turn in early, I said, stretching. Big day tomorrow. Last-minute stuff to sort. Of course, babe, she said, returning to her magazine. Sleep tight. I walked down the hall to our bedroom. Our bedroom. For 2 more weeks, according to her schedule. I closed the door softly. The smile evaporated from my face, leaving a placid, neutral calm. I opened my laptop, the glow illuminating the room. I navigated to the airline's website, clicked Manage Booking, and entered the confirmation number. The first step was always the hardest. My finger hovered over the mouse. Then I clicked Cancel Passenger, Sarah Wilkins. A dialog box popped up. Are you sure? I was. For the first time in a long time, I was completely, absolutely sure. I selected the reason, change of plans. The next few hours were the most focused of my life. With the bedroom door closed, the only sounds were the whisper of my laptop fan and the distant hum of the city through the window. Sarah was watching a reality show in the living room, her occasional laugh a jarring counterpoint to my silent mission. It felt less like revenge and more like archaeology. I was carefully excavating my own life, my own resources, from the ruin of a relationship that had already been declared a dead site by its other occupant. Step 1. Transportation. Her ticket was already canceled. I applied the credit to my own return flight, upgrading it to an exit row for comfort. Then, I went to the train reservations, the high-speed rail from Paris to Amsterdam, the scenic route through the Alps. One by one, I edited each booking. Passenger 2 was removed. The price adjusted downward. Refunds, where applicable, pinged back to my card. A small, satisfying chime of digital karma. Step 2. Accommodation. The hotels were next. A charming boutique place in Paris with a view of Saint-Chapelle. The Canal House Hotel in Amsterdam. The hillside villa in Italy with the terrace sheet specifically saved on Instagram. Login. Manage booking. Change from 1 room, 2 adults, to 1 room, 1 adult. Some charged a small fee. I paid it without a blink. It was the cost of freedom. For the ones with non-refundable deposits, I simply changed the name on the reservation to mine alone. She could argue at the front desk all she wanted. Her name wasn't in the system. Step 3. Experiences. The cooking class in Tuscany. The private guided tour of the Van Gogh Museum. The sunset gondola ride in Venice. I canceled her spots. In some cases, this freed up a time slot I preferred. I booked it. Step 4. Finance. I logged into our shared trip account, a separate savings pot I'd set up. I transferred exactly 50% of the remaining balance back to my personal savings. It wasn't vindictive. It was mathematical. She had forfeited her share the moment she decided this was a transaction, not a pilgrimage. I left enough in the joint account to cover my single occupancy costs. Finally, I opened a blank document. I typed a clean, new itinerary. My itinerary. I printed it, the warm paper whispering out of the printer. I placed it in the center of the kitchen counter, next to the fruit bowl. A decoy, a relic for her to find. My own bag was already half-packed in the closet. I finished it in 10 minutes, taking only what I needed. I left behind the sweater she'd bought me last Christmas, the one I never liked. I left behind the cologne she said was our scent. Let Mark smell like it. I slid into bed beside her just after midnight. She murmured sleepily and curled away from me, towards her nightstand. I stared at the ceiling, my mind not racing, but calmly reviewing the checklist. Every I dotted, every T crossed. I felt a profound, surreal peace. The grief was there, a hollow chamber in my chest, but it was sealed off behind a wall of pure purpose. I slept a deep, dreamless sleep. My alarm went off at 4 a.m. Our flight was at 11 o'clock, but I told her I wanted to get to the airport early to handle some last-minute lounge pass thing. She'd groaned but agreed. I dressed in the dark, shouldered my single bag, and walked to the bedroom door. I paused, looking back at her sleeping form in the pale blue light from the window. The woman I'd thought I'd build a life with. Now, she was just a shape under a duvet, a problem I had already solved. I felt nothing. The Uber picked me up at 4:30. As we pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back at the apartment. I was already gone. The airport was a cathedral of quiet efficiency at that hour. I checked my bag, sailed through security, and found my gate. I bought a coffee and a paperback I'd been meaning to read. I turned my phone to airplane mode before I even boarded. As the plane lifted off, the city lights shrinking into a grid of insignificant sparks, I felt a weight dislodge from my soul and vanish into the jet stream. I didn't turn my phone on when we landed at Charles de Gaulle. Paris was overcast and beautiful. I took the RER into the city, found my hotel, and checked in with an ease that felt miraculous. The room was small, perfect, and mine alone. I dropped my bag and went walking. It was late afternoon when I finally powered on my phone. It chimed and vibrated for a full minute, a frantic, dying insect. Dozens of missed calls, a torrent of texts, escalating in panic and fury. I scanned them without opening. Where are you? The Uber's here. At the airport. Where are you? They say my ticket is invalid. What did you do? Answer your phone, you psychopath. I'm at the check-in desk. They say I'm not in the system. I sipped my espresso at a corner cafe table, watching Parisians stride past with their baguettes and purposeful indifference. I felt aligned with them. I was just a man at a cafe, watching the world go by. The phone rang again. Sarah. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. On the third ring, I took a breath, tapped the green button, and held the phone to my ear without speaking. The sound that came through was not a voice, but a shattered vase of noise, screams, airport announcements, and ragged, hyperventilating sobs. What did you do? She shrieked, the words distorted by fury and a terrible, public humiliation. The airline says I have no ticket. They're looking at me like I'm insane. The hotels. I called the first one as a backup. They said the reservation is only for you. Where are you? I let the static and the scream hang in the Parisian air for a beat. I took another slow sip of my coffee. It was excellent. I'm in Paris, I said, my voice flat, calm. A stone dropped into her whirlpool of chaos. You should probably call Mark. Maybe he can book you something. He has ambition. A vibe. I ended the call. I didn't slam the phone down. I just tapped the red button and set it gently on the wrought iron table. The silence that followed was the most luxurious sound I'd ever heard. I finished my coffee, paid, and left a €2 coin on the saucer. The plan for the next day was the Louvre. It had been her idea, of course. She'd talked for weeks about the winged victory, the Venus de Milo, making a cute video for TikTok in front of the pyramid. I went for myself. I spent hours getting gloriously lost. I stood before canvases that had survived centuries and felt my own small drama shrink to its proper, microscopic size. In the den and wing, I finally found her. The Mona Lisa was smaller than I'd imagined, shielded behind glass and a respectful crowd. She was enigmatic, quiet, her smile knowing. It was a smile that had seen every kind of betrayal, every human folly, and had simply chosen to keep her own counsel. I felt a kinship with her in that moment. I turned, raised my phone, and took a selfie. Just me, with her faint, inscrutable smile over my shoulder. The lighting was perfect. I looked well, rested, at peace. Myself. I opened my texts, scrolled past the cascade of red notifications from her number. I selected the photo. I typed a caption, not to hurt, not to gloat, but to state a simple, elegant truth, the final line of the report. Thanks for the recommendations. The art is breathtaking when you're actually seeing it for yourself. I hit send. Then, before any response could bubble up, I went into my settings. I blocked her number. The action felt ceremonial, a laying down of a burden. As an afterthought, I opened Instagram, an app one rarely used. I posted the same photo. No tag, no location, just the picture. The caption, perspective. Then I logged out. I didn't need to see the comments. I didn't need to witness the social fallout. But I knew it would happen. Stacy would see it. Their other friends would see it. They'd see my calm face in Paris, and they'd remember Sarah's hysterics from the airport, the story she'd inevitably tried to spin. The math wouldn't add up for them anymore. The narrative of the clueless boyfriend would crumble under the weight of a single, tranquil, unanswerable selfie. Karma, I was learning, wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a quiet, inevitable process of cause and effect. She had planted the seed of betrayal with cold calculation. I had simply chosen not to water it. I had simply walked out of the garden and into the sun, walking back to my hotel along the Seine, the evening light painting the stone buildings gold. I realized I wasn't thinking about her at all. I was thinking about what I wanted for dinner. I was thinking about the train to Amsterdam tomorrow. I was, for the first time in years, thinking only about what I wanted. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. Amsterdam was a dream of water and light. I learned to bike without hands along the canals, ate stroopwafels warm from the market, and spent a whole afternoon in a single bookstore talking to the owner about obscure 20th century novels. The ghost of Sarah's voice, boring, color-coded spreadsheet of a life, would occasionally whisper, but it had no power here. My life, it turned out, wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a blank page, and I was writing in pen. My phone was a tool for maps and camera use. Notifications were off. But a week into the trip, as I was packing my small bag for the train to Switzerland, I saw a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize, but whose area code I knew. It was Stacy. A part of me wanted to delete it. But another part, a colder, more curious part, wanted to hear the official spin. I put in my earbuds and pressed play. Hey, it's Stacy. Her voice was strained, a poor imitation of warmth. Look, I know you're probably having your moment over there, but you need to call Sarah. What you did it was cruel. You humiliated her in public. She's a mess. She's crying all the time. And Mark? Total loser, obviously. He ghosted her the day after the airport thing. So she gets it, okay? She made a mistake. But what you did, that's a character thing. You can't just vanish like that with someone's trip. It's psychotic. Be the bigger man. Call her. I stood in the middle of my pristine hotel room, my folded shirt in my hand. I looked out the window at the gabled rooftops. I didn't feel anger at Stacy. I felt a distant pity. She was a loyal soldier in a pointless army, reciting propaganda she only half believed. I called the number back. It rang once. Hello. Stacy's voice was sharp, expecting Sarah. Stacy, it's me. A pause, then a rush of breath. Oh, okay, good. Are you ready to be reasonable? I'm looking at the Alps from my train window, I said, my voice even. The train wasn't moving yet, but the Alps were on the horizon. The truth was close enough. They've been here for millions of years. They've seen empires rise and fall. Do you think they care about airport drama? What? Don't be a pretentious ass. This is about a real person you claim to love, who is, I don't. I interrupted, the statement floating out clear and weightless. I don't care. Have a nice life, Stacy. I ended the call. I blocked that number too. The action was becoming habit-forming. Liberating. I finished packing, the encounter already fading, less significant than choosing which socks to bring. The Alps were not a disappointment. Hiking alone, with only the crunch of my boots and the distant clank of cowbells for company, I felt my mind stretch and quiet in a way it never had. One evening, in a rustic lodge, I checked my email. Amidst travel confirmations was one with the subject line, a mother's plea. It was from Linda, Sarah's mom. I skimmed it. I never wanted to get involved, but my daughter is shattered. What you did was calculated and cold. She sees now how wrong she was, how much she took you for granted. She's crying every day, real tears of regret. You loved her once. I saw it. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive? She's sorry. True remorse deserves a chance. Please, call her. I read it twice. The language was interesting. What you did was calculated and cold. Yes, it was a response in kind. Real tears of regret. Regret for what? For getting caught? For her plan failing? For losing the trip, not the man? I felt nothing. No swell of righteousness. No flicker of old affection. Just the clear, certain knowledge that responding would be an act of re-engagement. It would pull me back into their emotional orbit, their drama. I was in a different gravitational field now. I didn't draft a reply. I didn't rage. I selected the email and clicked delete. Then I went to the lodge's common room and spent the evening learning how to play jazz from a retired Swiss schoolteacher. I laughed more that night than I had in the previous year. The trip ended. I came home tanned, 5 pounds lighter, and mentally renovated. I'd given up the apartment lease from abroad. A simple email to the landlord with a penalty payment. My things, what few I wanted, were in a storage unit. I'd rented a clean, modern one-bedroom in a different part of the city, closer to a park where I'd started running in the mornings. Life was simple. It was mine. The encounter happened on a bright Saturday morning 2 months later. I was in the produce section of the upscale grocery store near my new place, debating the ripeness of an avocado. I felt a stare, the kind that carries weight. I looked up. Sarah was at the end of the aisle, clutching a handbasket. She looked diminished. Not ill, but frayed. Her hair was pulled back in a haphazard ponytail. Her eyes held a permanent, anxious tension. The vibrant, performative confidence she'd always worn was gone, replaced by a kind of nervous exhaustion. She was staring at me as if I were a ghost or a mirage. I held her gaze for a second, then looked back at the avocado. I gave it a gentle squeeze. Perfect. When I looked up again, she was walking toward me, her steps hesitant. She stopped a few feet away, her basket trembling slightly. "Hi," she said. Her voice was small, stripped of all its former musicality. "Hello," I said, placing the avocado in my cart. "Hi, I see you." She swallowed. "You look good. Really good." "Thanks," I said, moving my cart slightly to let another shopper pass. I was polite, unhurried. "Hi." She took a shaky breath. "I've been in hell. A real hell. I miss you. I missed us. What we had. Can we just talk? Even just coffee? No expectations. I need you to know how sorry I am. It's all I think about." I finally looked at her fully. I searched my feelings, scanning for the old ache, the anger, the love. There was nothing, just a faint, anthropological curiosity. Here was a person who had once been the center of my universe. Now, she was a mildly inconvenient acquaintance in the grocery store. I offered a small, polite smile, the kind you give a cashier or a stranger who asks for the time. "I'm sorry, I'm in a bit of a rush," I said, my tone carrying a mild, genuine apology for the rush, but none for her. Her face crumpled, just for a second, before she steeled it. "Please, 5 minutes." I glanced past her, down the length of the gleaming aisle. "Actually," I said, my voice calm, detached, "I think the line is shorter over there." I nodded toward the express lanes. "Take care, Sarah." I didn't wait for a response. I turned my cart and walked away. I didn't feel a need for a final, cutting line. There was no power in hurting her. The power was in the absolute, unassailable lack of impact she had. I didn't look back. I didn't wonder what expression was on her face. I didn't hurry my pace. I wheeled my cart to the shorter line, as I'd said I would. I unloaded my groceries. The avocado, some fresh fish, lemons, asparagus. Healthy, simple food for one. As the cashier scanned my items, I realized what the feeling was. It wasn't victory. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was silence. A deep, internal silence. The kind where you can hear your own thoughts clearly, without static, without the frantic, desperate background noise of someone else's narrative. I paid, collected my bags, and walked out into the bright sun. I thought about the steak I would grill for dinner. I thought about the book I was reading. I thought about the quiet of my own apartment. I didn't think about her at all. She had become what she'd always secretly believed me to be, irrelevant. The difference was, I didn't have to say it. I just lived it. And living, I had discovered, was more than enough. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Share it in the comments.